Welcome. It's 5:30 on October 17th, 2024. We will now call the meeting of the Planning and Zoning Board for the Village of Tequesta to order. Meg, can I have a roll call, please?
Yes. Leslie Dasher.
Here.
Teresa Maggio.
Here.
Elizabeth Shower. Sherry Ambrose.
Here.
Jean Mickeldowney.
Here.
Marie Safiri.
Here.
Mark Valdez.
Here.
Jared Gaylord.
Thank you. Okay, if I can have approval of the agenda, tonight's agenda. Is there any changes? Okay,
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda for tonight. I second that.
all in favor?
Aye.
Approved. And we will, approval of the previous meeting minutes for July 18th, 2024. Does everything look right? Okay, if I can have a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes from July 18th, 2024.
Okay,
I'll second it.
okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, previous minutes are approved. Okay, we have one agenda item, SPM 424, application from Tam West Realty, Inc. for a minor site plan modification for new paint colors on the existing County Line Plaza in the C2 zoning district. Is Ms. Weibel?
Oh,
Oh, no, that's you.
Yeah, that's me.
Are you the presenter?
yes, I am.
Okay.
You ready?
Meg, yes.
Like I said, we're just gonna be best friends. All right. So, good afternoon, everyone. This is going to be County Line Plaza. We are coming back for site plan modification 0424, which is going to be talking about the roof color and some new locations of the previously approved paint colors. So we know our property, County Line Plaza. It's right here, US 1, Village Boulevard. These are the current conditions. We're all very familiar with them. On the left-hand side, we have the previously approved colors. On the right, you'll see the new proposed roof color. I do also have a board here. If you want to pass that around. The colors are they're more accurate on the board than they are on the TV.
Okay.
So what you're going to see here is the northeast-facing facade with the new proposed roof color. Again, north-facing facade with the roof color. And the east-facing. So this is a color key. We've got the Polaris is the main body of the building. That was kind of what was encouraged in our last meeting. Solstice will be the secondary. Thunderbolt is going to be the column bases and awnings. Icy Bay, the internal walkways and overhang, the public storefront. And Linen Ruffle is going to be all of the trim and enhancements. And of course, bottom right there is downpour, the proposed roof color. So as I mentioned before, there are some alterations in the color locations. On the left-hand side is what was approved with SPM 224. The Solstice was really more of the main color, and the Polaris was a backup. Your Polaris is here, and the Solstice is here. With the new submission, the Polaris takes like a larger role. So we've got Polaris up front and the Solstice in the back. I have some better images as well. So current conditions, this is what was approved. Here we have Polaris, here we have Solstice. That was the approval, and this is what they are now proposing with the increase in Polaris.
Okay.
Okay.
We've got some more vantage points. This is with the new color locations and the roof. Sorry about this. I did not know. I could not figure out how to do this for you guys. This is the best I came up with, but like we talked about.
Pretty good.
It's good. That's a lot for your eyeballs. But like we talked about with the color key, you've got Polaris, that's your main body of the building now. Solstice is going to be up here. Linen Ruffle is your trim. Thunderbolt is the awnings, and then all of the bases, and I think there's a couple little planters down here. Icy Bay is going to be the internal walkway, and downpour is the roof. There's another one.
I'm trying to figure out the linen ruffle. Are we seeing a clear color of linen? It's not really pink, is it?
No, it's not pink. If the color board can come back around, it's
It's
creamy.
cream.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
It's
like a
this.
cream.
It's a cream color. Yeah.
One of the pictures looked
Yeah, the
really
picture
good.
is deceiving. but-
Yeah, this is very
Oh.
different than what we're
Do you need-
seeing.
Watch the mic.
Oh, whoa.
So all of these colors, except for the downpour, were the ones that you looked at in the last approval. So none of that has changed, just some of the color locations and of course adding the roof color.
Okay.
So this is an elevation we hadn't seen previously. It is the Jersey Diner. Again, I wanted to call out, like, this color right here is the Polaris, and the upper one is the Icy Bay. It looks a lot different, I think, here than what you would see on the board. Monument signs, this is something that we didn't get to look at before, but this is what they are proposing. You've got your one vertical monument sign here in the middle of the property, Polaris and then Ruffle, and then the lower entryway signs. You've got 1, 2, 3 coming down US 1, Polaris, Lynn Ruffle, and there's Thunderbolt called out as well, but it's for like the mechanics, the trim, the little things that you're really not gonna see when you're standing there or in this photo. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any board questions for Meg?
No?
I have a few comments.
Okay.
Are we having another presentation or just?
That's it, isn't it?
So the applicant is here to speak. She's not going to give a presentation though, but she's here to answer any questions.
Did you want to come up and give us your name and address for the record, please?
Yes, Sandy Harbaugh, and I'm at 564 US 1 North, Augusta, Highway 1 North.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Ms. Carbaugh?
I have a question about the roof.
Mhm.
Okay, the roof color is going to change. The roof itself is going to remain?
Yes, we actually have the same barrel tiles that you have on this building.
Mm-hmm.
They obviously look very different with the orange tone that's on there now, just like I was noticing on your building. The subtle color that's here makes it look totally different. But the plan was that we would have, I think the approval was that we would have 6 months to see how that looked once the painting was finished. And then if everyone decided that it didn't work, then we would move forward with painting the roof. So that's why we went ahead and just proposed the color. So we would have that already done and in place. If we did need to do it, we wouldn't have to go back through the whole process.
All right.
Okay.
This is just a comment I'm going to make, only because I live in County Line Plaza. I do business everywhere in there.
I do too.
I'm one of those spend your money locally. So the roof, when it's painted, will be repaired for those entities that have leaks in the roof?
Well, we have just recently sealed one whole section. We just
Oh,
finished that.
thank you.
Yes. That just was finished probably 3 weeks ago.
Okay,
Just in
good.
time. We will be moving forward. Some of those roofs are still under warranty, so we can't actually touch them or do any modifications. We still have to work within those warranties, but as those fade away, yes, the roof issues there are constant. That's,
It's constant in
It's-
every
it's the biggest
shopping
thing I
plaza.
do.
You're not alone. It's
Yeah.
constant,
But
but
yeah,
I
we're getting
just,
that under control, and I actually hired a new roofer when I came on, and we're actually ahead of the game. So, yeah, we're making progress with
okay.
that.
It's terrible when you look up and see the
Oh,
stains.
ceiling tiles, oh, no. And that's what I've told them, as soon as that was sealed, change the ceiling tiles. As soon as we know the leak is fixed, change the ceiling tiles.
And another comment that has nothing to do with your colors, I love them, they're beautiful. But who is responsible for power washing the sidewalks when all the restaurants have tables outside?
Well, that's an issue too, because we typically do them several times a year periodically. We've been putting it off, hoping that when the painting started, all the pressure washing would happen. So we did not do them last month like we normally would. But Buco, the ice cream shop, any place that serves food, or especially alcohol, and has tables, that's where it's the worst.
Yep.
I happen to feel like, that's a little bit of a gray area. I feel like sometimes those tenants need to be responsible for that additional cleaning, because it's not fair to my one person that I have to constantly be out there cleaning up every other week when kids have spilled ice cream. And I've removed some of the benches at the plaza because it was a place for not only people to sit and have fun, that's fine. It was attracting some of the homeless community where they were eating and drinking and what have you. Oh, excuse me. So we're trying to work with that, because that's one of my pet peeves. And
I'm
even-
glad you're addressing that, because,
Yes.
if you're gonna do all this beautiful stuff and then
Exactly.
you got
So
the ugly
plan is,
sidewalk.
once
Yeah.
it's all cleaned and done, The individual tenants that need above and beyond will be responsible for paying for that. We'll still help them do it. But if they don't do it, we will charge it back to them and we're gonna do it for them. Otherwise, we'll stay on a routine basis. And my person also, if it's touch-up, if it's just a one-off situation, I take a picture of it, send it to him. We have a plan for how he spot cleans it. And that and keeping the windows clean.
All right.
Yeah. I'm a little OCD when it comes to those things, so I'm on it. Yeah.
You would think that would be in their leases, you
Yeah.
know,
Well, the sidewalk situation is not.
sidewalk.
No, it's really beyond the doors and in. But if you think about normal wear and tear, you know, we don't ask people in Publix to come out and clean the sidewalks extra because they have a lot of traffic. That just comes with business. But if it's a restaurant or a bar where people sit and they spill things and, you know, yeah, that's a little different. in
Should
my
be in the
opinion.
lease.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's, we have the ability to work that in, even though it's not in writing. There's a clause that says basically the property, your property and your unit has to stay to a certain standard. So we can kind of determine what that standard is. And then unfortunately, that's not necessarily been done as much in the past. So now it's a little bit of a curve for everyone. But I think overall, people are really happy about it because even though they may not like it at the moment, they see that it's best overall for everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any more questions?
I have a few comments, if that's okay. So I wanted to say I appreciate very much that you tried to incorporate the comments of the LPA from the last meeting into this revision. And to the extent that the Polaris color reads more blue than gray when it's on the building, I do think that this is an improvement. I also think that having more icy bay on the building in the walkways is also an improvement, and it's better than the Solstice because I do think it reads more blue than gray, or more blue-gray, and I like the blue part. But after considering these changes, I still think that the all-gray color scheme doesn't fit well into the village in this location because it's not harmonious with the surrounding buildings, especially with the coastal color scheme going in next door with the reserve. And I'll leave it at that because I did explain at my thoughts of the last meeting are still hold true, I think. Also, I wanted to address the Dunkin' Donuts briefly because it was mentioned in our backup. I also don't think that the gray scheme here is harmonious with that building, which creates a quandary for this proposed color scheme because in my view, the Dunkin' Donuts shop's colors shouldn't have been approved because they violate the prohibition against symbolic colors, particularly the orange. And the conflict with this application is the reason why I think that check on the symbolic colors is so important because I don't think anything goes very well with that orange color. So I don't think it's fair to hold the rest of the building hostage to the orange color here. It's going to visually dominates now, and I think that orange is going to be even more obvious when the rest of the plaza is painted in this gray scheme. So I just want to make that note for the future in particular, that we need to make sure that the symbolic color piece doesn't hold back other good improvements. I think it would be hard for any color scheme to coordinate well with that, and that's true of a lot of the other ones, and I think that's why that's in the code. That's all I had to say.
Okay, Sherry? Okay, yes. Any public comments? Okay, closing board comments? Jay, did you?
Can I just make one staff comment? So this, if you approve this tonight, you'll essentially be modifying the original approval from last time. So remember that they were to come back and modify the roof color and create a master sign program within 6 months. So they've satisfied the roof color, but not the master sign program. So if someone's making a motion tonight and wants to continue that,
Okay, so we still.
I would recommend making that part of your condition, that they
Okay.
still have to come back within 6 months of completion of painting with a master sign program.
Okay, so
The
that
other
would be
thing,
waived.
the other thing I just remembered that when I was looking at the scheme online, the entrance, when you enter and it says County Line Plaza, is that in here?
It is.
Mhm.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
There you go.
There it is.
Okay.
I have one question about the master sign. Does that include all of the individual store? I know we discussed that last time and you
Yeah, so
were
we do
gonna
have a
work on.
plan. We've already
yeah.
kind of let tenants know that that's coming, because
Okay.
that will be a tenant responsibility
Great.
for each particular unit.
Okay,
We just are trying to get started with this project before we get full-blown season, before we start the
yeah,
next one.
understood. Okay, great. I look forward to seeing that.
Okay, and if we're done, I guess we're ready to proceed.
Can I ask a question of you guys?
Yes.
We approved a color and or roof change where the Purple Dragon Dojo is. I'm trying to remember the colors. Do you guys remember that?
Oh,
Where the what was?
The Purple
Oh.
Dragon, the dojo, and the
Yeah.
EVOO and all that. And I'm trying to remember, didn't that have
Oh,
grays in
sure.
it as well?
boy,
It was
That's
a
a good
It
roof.
was-
It's the same.
It wasn't the similar, it was,
It was a roof improvement, right?
yeah, they're
And-
painting
and
everything.
painting, yeah, painting.
I
and
think
roof,
it's
right.
more like it's a different tone of gray. I can probably
Gray's a
get the,
very broad term.
I guess I feel like a lot
Yes,
of,
yes.
to Marie's point though, I feel like a lot of what we've approved recently is going in a more gray direction. So like the change on Tequesta Drive was going to a gray and cream scheme, and then there are some others. So I guess I was thinking about it harmoniously more in that sense rather than just the
Yeah.
reserve.
I guess the ones, I'm not so much objecting to gray as an accent color as the like whole
Understand.
building. And like I said last time, I think part of the problem is the architecture here makes it very hard to break up and the building
yeah.
so that you don't have a solid mass. And I am totally sympathetic to the quandary, the problem that presents. But that's the
If
the
they had
problem
facade
here, is
changes,
that
it
we
would be
had
easier,
facade
yeah.
changes and we could make the individual storefronts look more like individual storefronts.
Yeah.
That's what I would like to see going forward, so I do wanna put that on the record for if
just
there's
no
a
architectural
redevelopment
break.
or,
There's nowhere to do it.
yeah,
There's no-
I understand that, this is just
Yeah.
paint this time.
And my only comment is overall, I like the plan, and the nice thing about the gray is down the road, there's a lot of colors that go with gray, you know, if you wanted to add,
And if you look
bright
at
cherry
grays
colors.
on a whole long scheme of grays, this has a lot of blue and green.
It's very good.
This is,
Green too.
this is very
Right.
hard to tell by looking at this.
Yeah,
That is
I'm
more
having a hard
accurate.
time with this
But
one
it
too.
really does have more of a coastal flair to it than it does a gray taupey.
well, it's funny, Marie said she sees blue and I'm seeing green.
Please green, yeah.
It's both. It's like
Yeah.
a
I
lot-
see blue-green.
That's what it is.
Yeah, there you go. And it is coastal.
Yeah.
And I think maybe we'll see more of that when it's actually done.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's hard
that
to tell
looks
from a
like gray
2-inch
on gray,
square. Yep.
but I think it's gonna show up.
Okay, if board comments, staff comments, we can proceed with the recommendation, or, no, this is a final,
this would be a final vote.
and if we want to include the signage. Oops, sorry. Okay, can I get a motion?
I forgot how to include the signage.
You would just say that within 6 months of
Okay.
completion of painting, the property owner must apply for site plan modification to create an updated master sign program for the entire plaza.
You just said you
So I would make a motion to approve
SPM
this as
424.
presented
with,
with,
what I just said.
just said,
Yes.
with whatever Jay just said.
So approve with previous condition?
Yeah.
okay, now do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Okay, so the motion on the floor is to approve SPM 4-24 with the expectation of the signage plan coming forward in 6 months after painting is done. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
No.
I'm sorry?
No.
Okay.
Sorry.
SPM is approved.
Thank you.
So quiet. Okay, and any more comments? And we get a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Okay, now we can move on next to the local planning agency, we're ready. Okay. Okay, it is 5:59 on October 17th, 2024, and we're now calling the meeting of the local planning agency for the Village of Tequesta to order. And Meg, will you do roll call, please?
Chair Leslie Dasher,
Here?
Vice Chair Teresa Maggio,
Here?
Member Elizabeth Shower, Sherry Ambrose,
Here.
Jean McEldowney,
Here.
Marisa Fury,
Here.
Marco Valdez, Jared Gaylord.
Okay, and if I can have approval of tonight's agenda?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The agenda is approved, and the approval of the previous meeting minutes for July 18th, 2024.
Make a motion to approve the minutes from July 18th, 2024.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the previous meeting minutes are approved. Okay, and our first agenda item is ordinance 09-24, floodplain management. And Mr. Cameron?
And I'll read the ordinance in since
Okay.
Dylan's in New York City right now, so
Okay.
good for him.
Yeah.
Okay. An ordinance of the Village Council of the Village of Tequesta, Florida, amending the Tequesta Code of Ordinances at Chapter 78 zoning, Article X11, flood damage prevention to update the effective date of the current applicable NFIP flood insurance study and flood insurance rate maps. And by revising certain definitions and correcting occasional scrivener's errors and non-substantive internal inconsistencies, providing that each and every other section and subsection of Chapter 78 zoning, Article XII, flood damage prevention shall remain in full force and effect as previously adopted, providing a conflicts clause, a severability clause, and authority to codify, providing an effective date, and for other purposes.
Okay, and Mr. Cameron, if you'll state your name and address for the record, please.
It's Wayne Cameron, 345 Augusta Drive.
Okay.
Floodplain management, manager and building official. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me here. This is more, regarding this ordinance, as you already determined, is more of a housekeeping matter than anything else. A little bit of background, from 2011, the Florida Department of Emergency Management has been working with the communities within the NFIP to help transition ordinances, make them in compliance, and making sure that there are uniformity with the code as the code changes have taken place. What you're going to look at tonight is the ordinance which makes a change because of the new flood maps that are coming out with an effective date of December 20th, 2024. Next one. This is the letter of final determination from FEMA. FEMA periodically, through their studies, revise the flood maps based upon various factors, conditions, climate change, hurricanes, floods, so on. And in this final determination, as part of the continued eligibility in the NFIP program, we're required to adopt or show evidence that we've adopted a floodplain management regulations as part of our ordinances. So we have our current ordinance, which is the backup document in front of you, and you see in that the highlighted changes that were made. And lastly, just letting everyone know that the flood map information is available on the village's website, and this is how it's located under the building department, flood information. That's the link to it, and it allows you to basically put your address in, and you're able to know what your flood map looks like, or your flood zone looks like. And I'll give you a quick example of that right now. And that's available to all residents. I'm picking a random address here because it will show very easily what their existing flood zone is and what the new map will show. So I'll use this one to show the difference in elevation on the proposed map. So this was currently elevation 5 with a freeboard of 1, making it 6. So the new one is a foot higher at 6 with a freeboard of 1, making it 7. And so an FFE of 7 is the minimum flood elevation that structure will be built at. So if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Okay. Board, is there any questions for Mr. Cameron?
I do have a question. So in the definition section, 78832, in market, the definition of market value.
Yes.
The struck through part on, at the beginning, the change here seems to me to be substantive. So I was wondering why that is being included. So the market value as it's defined in the strike through language is what I understand is the actual textbook definition of market value. And I'm concerned that we might need another term if we're defining it as the cash value determined by an appraiser, something like appraised value. And so the reason for my comment is that in general, I don't think it's a good idea to have, to define a term that has a common meaning as something other than that accepted meaning. And that first sentence, it seems to me, is an objective reference that we might want to keep. So it would, in other words, that the willing buyer, willing seller definition is what I would expect the appraisers to be using, and I'm sure that they have guidelines that require them to do it, but I like having it in code too, so that, just to prevent any.
So the changes that
possible
were
abuse.
made was done, you can go back to the other slides, but basically, let's go up to like 1, wherein it's from the determination letter. Let's go to the determination letter. So the changes that were made was done from, based on the recommendations that were made from the Florida Department of Emergency Management.
Okay.
They looked at the document and they compared that from what FEMA defines from their substantial damage, substantial improvement, and that's where they're asking that the continuity is the same. So we're not the ones that's making the changes, it's their recommendation that these changes be made.
Okay. Do you know why they recommend not having a definition of market value that conforms to like the general
I don't know
accepted?
what that answer would be. I'd have
Okay.
to contact, as I said, they've decided that it stems from what FEMA directs us to be in terms of how they define substantial damage, substantial improvement,
Okay.
and what they've determined the market value and those definitions, and what they've basically said was that we try to keep them consistent throughout.
Right.
So it's the same, if you look in the FEMA handbook, the definition should be the same that we're looking at here.
Okay. And so FEMA defines it as what the qualified appraiser, independent appraiser says is market value, or the
Well-
cash value?
Well,
'Cause that's-
as you know, that's all subjective. So you get, one appraiser has one number, another appraiser has
Right,
another number.
yeah.
And then that's why they'll give comps, and they'll have 4 or 5 comps of what those values are, and they take an average, and then
Right.
determine what that's what market value would look like.
Right, no, I understand how it's determined. The concern I have is that if we take out, it seems to me that, so looking at this, if it were to, someone were to be asking, what is market value? Because I assume, in this case, they didn't like what the independent appraiser came up with.
Right.
If we've removed the objective reference of willing buyer, willing seller, not under compulsion and with reasonably full knowledge,
Right.
then it is whatever the independent appraiser says in the, so and I'm not sure if that works against in the context of this ordinance and the other ordinances, if that might pose a problem for a resident in particular is what my concern is here.
I don't know what that answer is.
Okay. Because in a judge who was looking at it, if you had the standard definition in it and you
Right.
take it out, is going to assume that you took it out, and so that definition doesn't necessarily apply, I would think. And that's why the situation where I wouldn't want people to be in, where they couldn't argue the standard definition of market value if they had a problem. And maybe it doesn't come up very often, but that's the concern I have.
There's a memo online on floridadisaster.org that outlines the Florida guidance for amending the definition of market value. I haven't had time to read it, I just found it Googling it.
Okay.
So there might be something in there that speaks to it. It seems like there's a pretty substantive reason for the suggestion being made.
But it does say actual cash value, so that would be the price at which property changes hands.
Right, so in that
it's-
case, it would seem to
cash
me to
value
be
seems easier.
wise to leave it in, because it's just a,
Well,
that's
no,
what
in
it
cash
means.
value is already in there.
It seems like their issue is relating to how damages impact an appraised value, so that may be the basis for the change. I don't, again, just found it, haven't had a chance to read it,
Sorry,
it wasn't my question.
I have a question, so, I don't know if this is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but next one.
Can we wait till public
Oh.
comments?
The other reason why this struck me was that in section 78787, it looks like if we go to this definition, it could potentially make that awkward to apply, because in subsection 1, the building official and the floodplain administrator have to estimate the market value, and this is a quote, or require the applicant to obtain an appraisal of the market value. And that latter requirement could end up being circular if we define market value as the value that is determined by the appraiser. And I realize that that the appraiser should be using the standard definition of market value. My concern is just in this situation where there's a potential problem, or where someone is not happy with the market value.
But it does say
And
in
the other,
cash
it's not
value.
just, well, so, but it also says the tax appraiser, the assessed tax value.
But that's one of the options you have.
I'm not sure it's an option, it's one of the two. And so you can use that from yes, it is one of the possibilities, but I think that's the option for the building official or the floodplain administrator, not the resident who's been affected.
I think it's just a definition, not a judgment, it's just a definition.
Well, but the market value affects what right, the definition of market value and what that amount is would have an effect on how certain other parts of this ordinance work, right?
Yeah, Wayne, how does that affect the actual application of the ordinance? Are you aware?
The ordinance itself, I mean, changing the definition, you say?
No, the market value, how is it relevant to the actual code itself?
So the market value it's related to substantial damage. So to determine substantial damage, it's 50% or greater of the market value of the structure. So that's how the formulas are all tied together. And that's why you're stressing how are you defining it.
Right.
Again, this came from them as that we needed to change
Okay.
the definition to be in conformance with what FEMA has. If necessary, I'm going to have to come back after well, we kind of run into a time constraint because the maps are being adopted.
December.
If we don't adopt this tonight, then we're not going to be in compliance because I have to go to council in November for a reading. If we have to come back with a definition and get clarification on this, I don't have the information, so I have to check with Florida Department of Emergency Management if it's okay to make the change on this, and I'll make that change before it becomes the ordinance. So I do have that much time to research this particular component. So if that's what the board's wishes are, I can look into that and make sure. So if I understand you correctly, you don't want to make a change to the definition, you want it to remain the way it is.
I would like to leave in the standard definition of market value, the price at which property changes hands between
Willing
willing
buyer
buyer
and
and
willing
willing
seller.
seller with,
That's
with the reasonably well-informed
Okay.
and not under compulsion.
I can see if we can
part.
add that, I will talk to legal. and
I mean,
Tallahassee.
what I really would like to know is the rationale for FEMA's
The
recommendation.
rationale is really they want to keep things consistent with their definitions in their handbook
Okay.
and everything else.
Do they define cash value then in their?
They have definitions of everything.
Everything?
So
Okay.
they've got a book of definitions.
And I guess my other question is, if it's FEMA's handbook, is it in federal statute too, or is it
It's-
subject to change
It
as they
should be in
change their handbook?
statute, and
Okay.
all this stuff,
Okay.
it should be in statute. So I just don't have it, I'm not prepared.
Yeah,
I
no,
don't have it in front of me.
I didn't research it, but it struck me when we were. Yeah.
And then they also have you, if you can't find it, then you always use Webster's as your
Right,
definition.
yeah, that's actually, that was my concern, is that if we're removing the standard definition,
Yeah.
that then if someone's in a bind and wants to apply the standard definition, I could see.
So what happens here, from a flood, in the reality standpoint
Yeah.
that we're talking about here, if the evaluation is made, as you so rightly indicated, by the floodplain manager,
Right.
which is
Yep.
me. So I'll make a determination based upon what is the market value, and how I determine the market value, and what that substantial damage is, and whether the structure is substantially needs to be brought to the new elevation as determined by the ordinance in the floodplain
Right.
management section of the code. So what I am saying is that I can always look at, because the code does give me the latitude, how am I going to determine that? This is one tool, but there's other definitions throughout the code. The Florida Building Code has a definition as well, okay? However, I will take the consideration that you're referring to here and make that, I'll check with the legal
Yeah.
department regarding the definition,
Yeah.
if you're comfortable with
That, I
this.
would be comfortable. I
And
understand
then
you need
before
to
it gets
pass
to an
it.
ordinance,
Yeah.
I'll raise that to council,
Right.
as a concern that the LPA has
Yeah.
regarding this particular definition.
I don't have that concern.
No, I don't either.
I don't have it.
Okay, if we're ready to move on to public comments, Jared?
I only had a
Oh,
comment.
could you come to the podium and give your name and address for the record, please? And Meg?
Oh, sure.
It's Jared Gaylord, for the record, 20 Laurel Oak Circle. I just was asking really a question of the market value related to like the 50% rule, so if you were damaged, if you are rebuilding at 50% and you hit that threshold and you're below flood elevation, then you have to raise up the structure, that's what
Yeah.
That is correct.
it references. And, I mean, in looking at the prior definition of market value, I was wondering, when you first read it, you're thinking, maybe it's because they're excluding the value of buildings and structures, because,
Right,
and just looking at the land, because
Right.
you could have an extremely valuable piece of land that a willing buyer and
Right,
seller would be willing to purchase, right?
Yeah, but it's
Yeah.
not.
It's just the structure.
Structure.
But it goes on
Yeah.
to exclude those things, so yeah, it wasn't that piece, but, because you see that sometimes where you have like a very valuable piece of land, a very old house,
You may
and,
wanna- yeah, right.
but you're looking at the one, you're
Just
looking
Right.
at just the structure.
Just
Yeah.
structure.
Just the one.
Thank you, Jared. Any other public comments? Okay, public comments are closed, and did you have any comments?
No comments,
Okay, we
Wayne?
have no,
So, I would just want to say, I'm perfectly comfortable passing this. I would like to ask to get that clarification, just to make sure that we're not that we aren't removing something that we could leave in if we needed to.
okay.
And that's something Wayne can do, even if it's not
Yeah.
part of the motion.
Right, yeah.
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 Okay, and so we're looking at here to recommend approval of this, and possibly with just, to please look further into the clarification of that definition of
Perfectly put.
market
Thank
value.
you.
Okay. Okay, can I have if we're ready, can we have a motion?
So, motion to approve with
Recommend,
the recommendation.
recommend, yeah,
As presented.
to recommend approval.
To recommend for approval with, if you could, all the building officials to look into the market value.
Okay,
And if we could have an update at the council meeting, that'd be great.
okay.
I second that.
Okay. Okay, so the motion on the floor is for ordinance 924, floodplain management, to recommend approval with, please looking at further into the market value definition. Okay, and all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, the motion passes. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Cameron. Okay, and we will move on to ordinance 1124, parking regulations. And
I will be reading this one as well. Right, so ordinance 1124 is an ordinance of the Village Council of the Village of Tequesta, Florida, amending the Tequesta Code of Ordinances at Chapter 78 zoning, Article X, off-street and on-street parking and loading regulations by amending Section 78691 minimum standards to update ADA parking space requirements in conformance with the Florida Building Code, Section 78696 off-street loading spaces to provide loading space requirements for multifamily residential uses, and Section 78705 required number of parking spaces to provide parking space requirements for multifamily residential uses, providing that each and every other section and subsection of Chapter 78 zoning, Article X, off-street and on-street parking and loading regulations shall remain in full force and effect as previously adopted, providing a conflicts clause, a severability clause, and authority to codify, providing an effective date, and for other purposes. And I will be giving this presentation after I get a sip of water after that one.
Great.
All right. So this is ordinance 1124. It's a parking code update. Next slide, Meg. So in 2023, the Village Council retained the firm McMahon to conduct a parking study relative to existing multifamily residential uses in the village. The goal of the parking study was just to determine whether our existing multifamily parking code standards are adequate. As you know, we've had a few different multifamily projects come through in recent years, and there's some expectations that that there could be some additional ones in the future. So we just wanted to kind of truth our code and make sure everything was working adequately. 3 existing residential developments were identified to conduct data on. We wanted to ensure that it was conducted during peak season, so it was done in February of 2024. Next slide, Meg. We also selected 3 different developments in 3 different zoning districts that are all slightly unique. Lighthouse Cove's a large one in our mixed use district. Blair House West is a little bit smaller. It's right here on Tequesta Drive, and then Seamus is on Beach Road. So they're all kind of unique in their own way. Next slide, Meg. So our the parking accumulation analysis showed that the parking demand was 1.29 spaces, 0.94 spaces, and 1.2 spaces respectively, with an average parking rate of 1.12 per dwelling unit. This is below our code requirement of two spaces per multifamily unit, so it shows that it's generally working okay. But the analysis and discussion did point out that we do not have a guest parking code, which can lead to complications, especially when there's multifamily that's in a parking structure. So Seaglass would be a good example of that. They've only got, I think, 4 parking spaces, 4 guest spaces, and then everything is in the garage. And, there's been a lot of, myself included, people have noticed that they're parking at Coral Cove Park, including service vehicles. So, the council elected to direct staff to require 0.25 guest parking spaces per dwelling unit in multifamily. Pretty standard, in line with what other municipalities do. And there is also a provision that those spaces cannot be behind some sort of gate or something. They have to be open and accessible to the public. So in the case of, even if you had a multifamily with a parking garage, they could still be in the parking garage, but it couldn't be behind a gate. Next slide, Meg. It was also pointed out that the village does not have any loading zone requirements in multifamily projects. So again, at Seaglass, a lot of the service vehicles are parking in Coral Cove. I've heard, I can't think of the name of the apartments over here on Seabrook, but I think they even have issues where, when people are moving in, the moving truck's blocking traffic, or a service vehicle is always blocking traffic. So it makes it difficult to kind of keep the flow of parking moving, and sometimes there can be external impacts too, where those people end up going and parking in the right of way, maybe on Beach Road or somewhere else. So the village council directed staff to require 1 loading zone per multifamily development, but there's also a provision in there where the council can require an additional loading zone if needed. So in a unique situation, like maybe a really large multifamily project or a mixed-use project, they may say, we need 2 spaces here. So So that's how that's written. There's also a provision where, you know, let's say it was a smaller project, like let's say someone just happened to buy a half-acre parcel and do a 6-unit townhouse project on it, that they can show that they wouldn't have demand for a loading zone. So there's you know, ability for council to require more, but the applicant can also has a little bit of leeway to request less. Also, on the parking code standards, we have a lot of different ways that an applicant can reduce their parking. They can do a parking demand study. You can do kind of shared parking agreements. So even though we're requiring, you know, probably a little bit more than it appears is required, there's always a path for them to get less if there's an actual case for that. And our parking consultants kind of said that's the best way to do it, right? Set the bar kind of high, and if you want to give some leeway, make them prove to the council and to the village why there should be, you know, a reduction in parking.
Okay.
Next slide. Also, while I was updating our parking code, I noticed it was something I've had on my list of things to tweak in our code was we just had a small thing where it wasn't compliant with the ADA standards. So we just made a little bit of a tweak there, and then took some language that's in, I think, the Florida Building Code, just to clarify a few things with our ADA parking section. So I think the village attorney and I are you know, feel that it's consistent with ADA, and we're comfortable with that. And that's my presentation.
Okay.
Very good.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any board questions for Jay?
I have some comments. So I agree with the study that the village is totally deficient in guest parking. An example that you mentioned is one of the ones that comes to mind immediately. I think this is because of two trends: the gating of parking spaces in new buildings, and I think that's likely to continue. So I do want to see things outside of gates, or the guest parking spaces outside of gates. And two, there's an increase in service traffic generally, especially in the more expensive residential units. Those seem to have a lot more service traffic, deliveries and service providers. I think both of those trends have resulted in increased traffic and sometimes overflow from the buildings in question. And I do think it's really wrong for buildings to have guest and service-related parking that are spilling into lots that are either for public parks or into their neighbors' lots. That's a totally unacceptable situation that needs to be remedied. So I support the addition of the 0.25 guest parking spots per unit, but I noticed that in the Green Acres Code, they have 1/2 spot per unit, and I would be open to, if my fellow board members would be interested in that, to increasing, maybe not to a 0.5, but a little bit more to make sure that we don't find ourselves in a bind. Because I did notice some of the other places, I'm not as familiar with Green Acres parking situation, but I know some of the other municipalities have some parking issues with and they're closer to the proposed 0.25 guest parking. So I'd be open to, because I want to make sure that in the future, as we have more people and more units that are being developed, that we aren't creating another problem too. And especially if we have the latitude that Jay just mentioned about they can show us that they don't really need it, and we have the latitude to change it for them on a case-by-case basis. I think that would be justified, especially given the dramatic increase in deliveries and service vehicles that we've seen. I have one other point. On section 78.696, I think we might want to lower the building square footage for the loading space for the mixed-use district from 10,000 square feet to something smaller. Because the permitted uses in mixed use include a maximum 5,000 square foot commercial units, and some of those parcels aren't necessarily going to have a 10,000 square foot commercial piece with under the 20% has to be commercial, right? Yeah, and 80% residential. So if they don't hit the 10,000 square feet, they wouldn't have to have a loading dock. Is that correct, Jay? Because my concern here is that if we have a building that has ground floor commercial, but doesn't have 10,000 square feet there, they don't have to have a loading space, or the loading space for the commercial that's separate from the residential, and I would think that we would want that, because, at least from my perspective as a potential tenant in a mixed-use building, I think that those should be separate, the residential loading dock. So move-ins would not be affected by the general deliveries to the retail
Well, now-
space, or the commercial space.
In 696, is that what you said?
Yeah,
This
in
one.
696.
Yeah, okay, but, well, it doesn't say mixed use, it just says commercial industrial.
Right, but I think, so if you're in a mixed-use area, you
Mhm.
have to have commercial and residential.
Mhm,
And my
yes.
concern is that if you have a small enough lot and you don't have 10,000 square feet of commercial space, you
Mhm.
don't need a dedicated loading dock for that, or loading area. And just thinking that for the lifestyle of our residents there, that it would be better, I think, to have separate commercial, separate residential, rather than trying for them both to be using the same space. And that's the one, I think in all the others, once you get above 10,000 square feet, you have to have it, so
Mhm.
that would take care of that for them. But in the smaller buildings, I mean, I realize it depends on what the commercial use is, whether you need it. But then they could come and tell us, we don't need it because it's gonna be a lawyer's office, so
Yeah.
they're not
Yeah.
gonna, I mean, but if it's gonna be a small grocery store, I would like them to have their own loading dock, because you wouldn't wanna
Well,
have
they
to share
would
that
need-
with the
right,
residents.
yeah,
I think that's you found, I think, a pretty good missing gap in the code. But to your point, yeah, there may be some uses in the mixed use that wouldn't
Right.
need that,
Yeah.
so if the board was open to it, I don't know that we could solve it on the fly tonight, but we could, but before it goes to council, could make it say something like, cause the other one, section D says, village council may at its discretion require additional loading spaces in multifamily. We could probably say in a mixed use project, where appropriate, the council may require an additional loading zone space for the commercial component of the mixed use development.
Right, okay. I would think if we could tie it to businesses that are likely to have
Yes.
regular deliveries, so, yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are a bunch that don't.
Yeah.
So those you can exempt. I think it would be okay to exempt for that, as long as that use doesn't change, though. I mean, commercial can be anything, so I would wanna make sure that I just think
Yeah.
having them separate is probably a good thing for.
I don't think to your point, I don't think though you'd want to exempt them, because just because it's a lawyer's office today doesn't mean
Right,
five
yeah.
years
Sure.
it wouldn't be a
Yeah.
grocery. So
Right.
I wouldn't write in an exemption, I would
Yeah.
go in or
I
all the
maybe
way or
it's
not.
a special exception where they have to, I don't know if we can do that.
That's that's tricky.
I think you'd have to have it's tied to the use, and if the use changes, then they need to have space at least, so maybe what they do is leave open space that they had extra of, that they could convert into a loading area if they needed it down the road. That might be how, I hadn't.
We can play around with this for council. I think it's a good suggestion, but I also don't want it to be too prescriptive too, because there could be some instances where someone's doing like a small townhouse project, again, back to that, with like 10 units, and they have like a little coffee shop in the bottom, and we wouldn't want to require it in that case. But if someone was doing 9,000 square feet for a restaurant that's going to be getting weekly
Right, yeah,
deliveries,
they're
we
good.
would want that, so.
Right. Yeah.
Well, now, since this doesn't even say mixed use, can that be added to?
You can make the
Here,
recommendation for
and
council to consider that.
instead
It's
of-
something that hadn't come up, and
And it may never,
it may never come up, but to Marie's point, it could come up. I think it's actually, it's a good addition, in my opinion.
Yeah, and then maybe, instead of just any commercial, it would be required to have one space unless they can show that they don't need it, or something like that.
Mhm.
Like, she said 5,000 square feet, but if it's a restaurant or a grocery store or something like that, then they would need that loading space. And, but maybe we could just work on the language a little bit.
I would even just create a separate section called E under D, where it says the village council may at its discretion require additional loading spaces in mixed-use developments during the site, almost mirroring what's in D. and leaving it kind of open-ended. I
Okay.
think that's probably the best way to do it.
Okay. Okay, and other board comments?
Can I just make one addendum there, is to, with the intent to separate the loading areas from of the residential and the commercial, in
Yes.
your, I'm okay with,
Separate.
generally, I think with your, I just wanna make sure that in
Yeah,
the future,
so
that they
what-
understand why
yeah,
we're
so-
putting that in there, to say, to flag for them that,
Yeah, so it'd say, it could even say, provide an additional loading space in addition to loading spaces required for residential
right.
in a
okay,
mixed-use
for the
development.
commercial, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they can't park right in front of your door, my townhouse,
Right.
they can't park right in
Yeah.
front of my town,
Yeah.
appropriately placed.
I was just envisioning like a move-in situation
Right.
and your moving truck having to wait for and that conflict that, I think we can avoid it
Yeah,
here.
it's good.
Okay, the other board comments? Okay, we can open to public comment. Marco, name and address for the record, please.
Marco Valdez, 102 Beechwood Trail. I would caution against
May I?
raising the guests' spaces to 0.5, because you think about it, that's 2 to 1. So that means for every residence, every 2 residents, that's a guest space, which is more asphalt, which is, I think that's probably a little over constrained. So I would caution, is quarter maybe the right number? I don't know, but 50% is definitely too high.
Isn't
In my opinion.
0.25 per?
The proposal is 0.25, but I think, Ms. Superi said 0.5.
Oh, I
Green
see.
Acres has more,
Great, yeah.
so.
Yeah, but they also have 3, I think they also have like 3 spots for, I think they're the ones that also have 3 spaces per unit as well. So I think they
Oh,
also have
geez.
a lot more parking in
Wow.
general.
Wow.
So I just caution the board that I'd be careful with the 50%.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Okay, public comments are closed. And do we have any further comments from the board?
Yeah, just to be
Jane?
clear, I wasn't necessarily saying go all the way to 0.5, but
Right.
maybe a little more. I noticed some of them, it's just my concern was, we had West Palm and they had a very small amount, it looked like, and I know they have, it's not necessarily always easy to find a parking space there for, if you are in the guest parking space. I'm okay with the 0.25, but I'm looking down the road. I have concerns that we might not have, that even that might not end up being enough if every developer maxes out the buildings.
Yes, and they will. Okay, and no other board comments? Okay, how would you like to handle making a motion here?
I can make the motion to approve, with.
Recommend.
Amend with the change that, I guess, can we delegate to community development to add a recommendation, that we include for on section 78-696, an additional, well, I'll leave it to your discretion to how to put it in, but to include the ability to have separate loading docks, even if they don't hit in the mixed use district, even if their commercial space does not get to the 10,000 square foot.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty clear on
Yeah.
what
Okay,
you want to do.
and there needs to be a mixed-use space, because we don't even have that on the list per se,
Mhm.
it's not spelled out. Okay, is there a?
I'll second.
Second, okay. Okay, the motion on the floor is for ordinance 1124 parking regulations is to recommend approval with further discussion regarding mixed-use space and additional, lowering the square footage required for loading space. Is that more or less what we discussed?
Mhm.
Okay. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion passes. Okay,
Great.
and are there any other staff comments?
I just have one quick thing to raise attention to. So last year, I think that the PZB LPA meeting was pretty close to the holidays and Christmas time, and I think we ended up pushing the meeting up a little bit. This year, it's planned to be the 19th, which I know is it's like the Thursday right before people will probably start leaving for holiday vacations. So does the board, we don't have to decide this tonight, but maybe we could decide it by November. But would you want to or prefer to move it up a few days, maybe to Monday or Tuesday, the 16th or 17th?
Yeah.
And does anyone have any conflicts on those days?
So we're talking about December?
December 16th would be a Monday.
What
and,
happens in
I mean,
November?
we're home,
What
so
are we
it's,
doing in November?
Well, November, I think the November meeting is the
That's-
20th, right?
It's the 21st.
21st.
that's.
Is that
that's
Thanksgiving week?
No, Thanksgiving is
it's
one
the
week
week
later.
before.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
It's late this year, so.
Okay.
Sure is.
21st is November, that's set.
That's set,
No, he's talking
It's
about
but we're talking about December.
December.
Mhm.
Yeah, no conflict to move it earlier.
I'll have to check, but
Okay.
I'll email
Maybe
you.
the 16th we can discuss, which is a Monday, and that's 3 days earlier.
and I can send an email out to everybody
Okay.
just to
Let's
check.
just do it, yeah, send it out and.
Okay,
Yeah, that'll work.
just put it on your radar.
Okay.
If we know it in advance, it's okay.
Yeah, we're here, so it's not an issue. Okay, any other board comments? Okay.
One quick one. One thing that I'd been thinking about was, we have good slide presentations, and I was wondering if staff could put those online for the residents who would like to see them, somewhere on the, like, maybe after the meeting is done, but all of them, like the ones that come from you and the ones from, that are coming from applicants too.
Okay.
Just so we have.
Available on YouTube?
No, not on YouTube. So I think on YouTube, they're getting us. But on
Oh, I
the,
see.
what I meant was put the slide decks up afterwards, like if you could link them in
Sure.
to the agenda afterwards, just so, especially with projects that come through, so people can see, easily find them, because it's sometimes hard to see if you're watching at home.
Okay.
I see.
One thing we're starting to do is create something on the website where we'll have like it's what Palm Beach Gardens has, where they have like projects in review, like recently approved projects, projects under construction. So Meg's kind of working on that. She's our website whiz right now.
Okay.
So we are going to start doing that type of thing.
That's good.
And so, like for instance, right now we have 2 applications in. Well, one just came in yesterday, but another one that are actual like major site plans. They're the 358 Cypress project. Remember that car museum that came to you last
Yeah.
year? And then there's the old Bank of America building. We just got a submittal for that.
Wow.
And so those are plans that I think people will want to see as they come through. So we want to, put things on there, or like when conceptual presentations come through. So we'll work on that, but
Okay, yep. that
I'll
would
see if I can
address
find a
lot
way
of
too to
what I was
so we're
thinking.
doing that with our EAC. We're putting up all the presentations that are given because we have so many great EAC
Right.
presentations. So Meg will have to create a presentation tab now where people can go there and find our old presentations.
It might be maybe under the planning and zoning. I know we have, I think
Oh,
that's
yeah,
the
we could
clerk.
do-
There is a website there.
We could do it under the planning and
Maybe
zoning
that's the
board,
place.
actually.
I'll
Yeah.
leave that to your
Okay.
discretion, whatever makes sense, but.
And along the same thought, I do try to find occasionally, like these ordinances, we recommend approval, and what happens?
Okay.
You know, so I think you can find them on there, like when they finally do get passed, that you can see what changes were accepted or.
Wouldn't that be under the council?
You can find them through the council,
Yeah,
but they're, I don't know how easy it is to find them. I mean, we could always put the ones that come through the LPA onto there, right? Like the Live Local, this one, some of the other ones that you guys have reviewed.
Well,
You can
there's, like, if you look at the code pages, I think it says new,
It
what's
does,
new or
yeah.
something like
Mhm.
this. You can look it up, but it could be months before so it's,
Yeah.
but I'm always curious as to, did they reject everything we said, or,
They
so.
like it.
They generally like you guys. You do a pretty good
Well, I'm
job.
sure they, modify things, and they all have opinions, and.
The commercial code got adopted last night, by the way, and they took 4 of your 7.
Oh,
Ah.
So it's pretty good.
yeah,
Pretty good.
well, okay, that's good to know.
Yeah. I just think it'd be good to have all of them, because
Yeah.
even the floodplain things, so people have our building officials' presentation on it, which I think is nice to have for general knowledge.
All right, Meg, more work for you?
And I do have one not related question, but it is about the ordinance like for the artificial turf. That did pass, but who knows about it? I mean, we know two people that have since put artificial turf in their backyard, and the question was, did you get a permit? No. Because nobody knows, you know.
They
nobody-
don't know, and I know someone
and-
too.
Yeah, and who is told, because I walked into Home Depot and they have a big sign up for artificial turf, and
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
are these people told that you have to check with the individual municipalities?
Yeah.
or-
Oh, Home
I-
Depot
yeah.
isn't worried about that.
They're not gonna care, but I'm just curious as to how would the residents
I-
ever
there
know?
was-
Well, I sort of get confused with that because I've been a homeowner for many, many years. And anytime I ever did anything, I went and said, does this require a permit?
We've done that as well, yeah.
Yeah, I just automatically do it. Is this okay, or do I have to get a permit for this? So it seems kind of strange that they would just not
Yeah,
even
just-
think about that.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised, because they said, oh, well, so-and-so did it too, and it's like, oh, I didn't know that.
No, I know.
To the list.
Yeah, yeah.
No,
Yeah, I mean-
artificial turf is appearing everywhere right now. I don't know.
It was in, I think it was in the smoke signals, and I know this,
Oh.
the Friday
Okay.
news, it appeared in a bunch. I think and I think it was also on, I'm sure I saw it on one of the other
Really?
online things that I think the clerk's office has been doing a good job of
Oh.
putting out as
Yeah.
best they can,
Yeah.
huh? Yeah.
Oh,
The printed one.
Yeah,
that
so
comes up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the building department deals with it on permits, but of course, you know, people can do unpermitted work, right? They could,
Wait till
they could
after.
put a meth lab in their backyard, and if we don't know about it, we don't know about it, so,
Okay,
So I guess it's just spread the word. I don't know.
yeah.
yeah. Okay, are we ready?
I was-
Motion, oh, go ahead.
The suggestion about the presentations, you know, would be handy. I'm visually impaired, so, you know, it really would help me as well. Or maybe not do it ahead of time, but, you know, make it available at the time of the presentation or something, because looking at it on the iPad is very convenient for me, but, you know. But the backup is great, because I can blow it up and read whatever I need to do, that's cool. But if there's already prepared presentation, I understand you may not want to put it on the website because it's a public thing, but, you know, city board member, at least we can get the presentation ahead of time, you know.
I know, and I hate to say it, but like, a lot of times we're still working on it, like the week of, because unfortunately, we
Yeah,
typically
I'm saying
have.
I mean,
Yeah.
because you already done the public notice, so
Yeah.
this is just the presentation, or of what's going to be presented if you have it.
We could email it out beforehand too.
Yeah, that's all.
And my suggestion was even, like, the next day would be, I mean, I realize that for decision purposes, it would be helpful to have it the day. I was thinking more in terms of making it easy for people for residents who would like to watch it, but if it can be out the day of, that
Well,
would
they
be
can
great.
watch it on if you watch the YouTube, it shows the screen, doesn't it? When you're watching it on YouTube.
Sometimes,
The-
but I think actually, so, I don't mean to prolong the meeting. I actually prefer since it's a public meeting, I think we should just have the video stream, and then that's why I would, and sometimes, it's a little uneven in whether it's always up, and I'm not talking about just our meetings, but also the council meetings and so forth, and so just to make sure that the information's available.
I'm just looking for clarification. So the presentations are on the agenda, like you can see them
Yeah.
beforehand, and
Yes.
the public has access to them, but you want them on the PZB website.
Well, the slide decks aren't though, right? Because in our backup, we usually don't have the slide.
Yeah, they're usually not on there. I mean, sometimes they get in, like, I think yours is in for the paint project,
Yeah.
but like,
Yeah.
but mine, I did my presentation this morning.
Yeah, it's okay.
I know. It's like council meeting last night, I'm like swamped,
Well, yeah,
so.
that
I know, yeah.
All right, well, if you can, it's great, but yeah, next was in there. That was going to be
Right,
great.
yeah.
That would be that.
Okay, and if we can have
Way to go, man.
a motion to
Thanks.
adjourn?
I make a
Oh,
motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor? Okay, we are adjourned. Okay, good to see
Thanks,
everybody.
Jay.
We have a meeting next month, possibly? Yes.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
should,
okay.
we should.
I will not be at the November meeting, just so you know, I'm on business travel.
Oh, That sounds fun. I'm anxious to see what
No, we're-
they think of
I
it.
heard from
Well, somebody floated the thing. I think I saw someone blurb about it.
Oh, I have not heard that. I will,
All
let me set
right, guys,
myself
have
a
a good
note to
one.
go check on it tomorrow.
It was like a little piece of paper, like how it's been came to us, they mail, somebody sent it.
Yeah.